Good morning, especially to those who are joining us in the room. Good afternoon, good evening to those who are joining us from further afar. UNIDIR is truly delighted to be hosting the 2021 edition of the Outer Space Security Conference. And during these 2 days, we hope that this conference will serve as a forum to bring together the diplomatic community, as well as experts from military, industry, and academic backgrounds, to jointly consider the challenges related to security in outer space and to exchange ideas regarding solutions. First of all, I would like to thank our funders. This event is possible because of the financial support from the governments of the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China, and the French Republic, as well as the Fondation pour la Recherche Stratégique, with financial support from the European Union and the Secure World Foundation. This year, for the first time ever, we have attendees joining us, not just in person here in the room in Geneva, but also virtually from all over the world. And let me say on behalf of UNIDIR, we're extremely delighted that the Outer Space Security Conference is having such a global outreach. To open our discussion this morning, we're delighted to be joined by Izumi Nakamitsu as our first keynote speaker for this conference. She is the Undersecretary General and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, a position that she has held since 2017. Ms. Nakamitsu has had a long and successful career in the United Nations and has held many important roles therein. Unfortunately, with the General Assembly in full swing in New York, Ms. Nakamitsu could not be with us here in person today, but she kindly recorded a video highlighting why the international community needs to build a sustainable space security architecture. Now, over to the High Representative, and we will hear her recorded speech.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to address the UNIDIR Outer Space Security Conference. For many years, this conference has served as a central platform for facilitating dialogue amongst member states and other stakeholders. The need to preserve outer space as a peaceful, safe, secure, and sustainable domain has never been more pressing and urgent. We are on the verge of a renewed era of human exploration of outer space. Several national and private-led programs are under development to return humans to the moon and to reach Mars. These efforts will also support further scientific and economic activities on the moon and beyond. While these milestone achievements in exploration and human spaceflight capture most of the popular attention, it is also the case that humanity has become increasingly dependent on outer space at all levels of activity and daily life. Outer space systems are vital for solving global problems. More than 40% of the targets under the Sustainable Development Goals benefit from space-based data and infrastructure. Earth observation satellites collect data that drive global models to inform climate action. Space-based assets provide for early warning to prevent nuclear war and for the verification of disarmament instruments. A basic legal and regulatory framework for governing outer space was developed at a time when access to space was limited to a few major military powers. That framework has not kept pace with developments. For example, in recent decades, the presence of private actors in outer space has increased dramatically. Commercial sector is quickly becoming the dominant provider of space launch services and already operates the majority of functional satellites. At the same time, outer space remains a growing arena for geopolitical and strategic competition. An increasing number of states are treating outer space as a potential domain of active hostility, and some are developing and deploying dedicated anti-satellite systems. Accordingly, the growing governance gap is creating a risk that increasing congestion and competition could imperil access and use of outer space by future generations. Even a small number of intentional acts or accidents could render vital orbits unusable, disrupting critical services such as satellites used for telecommunications, positioning and navigation, Earth observation, the internet, weather forecasting, and many more. Filling this gap will require a combination of binding and non-binding norms, rules, principles, guidelines, and other effective measures. We believe the United Nations system is best placed to facilitate the further development of the international regime governing outer space. On 10th September of this year, Secretary General Antonio Guterres released his report entitled Our Common Agenda, which was mandated by the General Assembly in its resolution commemorating the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. It calls for a new global deal to protect global commons, deliver global public goods, and address major risks. Outer space is one of these global commons beyond the jurisdiction of any one state. The Secretary General has called for immediate actions to be pursued, including the elaboration of new instruments to prevent weaponization of outer space. He has also called for a multi-stakeholder dialogue on outer space to take place as part of a Summit of the Future. That summit is to be held in conjunction with the high-level week of the 78th session of the General Assembly. The outer space dialogue would bring together governments and other leading space actors. It could seek high-level political agreement on the peaceful, secure, and sustainable use of outer space, and to move towards a global regime to coordinate space traffic and agree on principles for the future governance of outer space activities. The proposal for this dialogue is based on the understanding that networked multilateralism is more effective in addressing 21st century challenges than our traditional deliberative processes. Multilateralism that is more networked draws together existing institutional capacities, thus overcoming fragmentation to ensure all are working together towards a common goal. In the context of promoting security and sustainability of outer space activities, such an approach would ensure the greater incorporation of academia, the private sector, and civil society in the norm building and regulatory process. Forums like this one can serve as an important platform for generating new ideas that can feed into both the Summit of the Future and into the work of the core United Nations bodies responsible for outer space sustainability and security. I very much look forward to hearing about the outcome of your discussions over the next day and a half. Thank you very much for your attention.
And for our second speaker, who will be joining us virtually, and who got up very early in the middle of the night, we are very honored to welcome Sirisha Bandla, Vice President of Government Affairs at Virgin Galactic. Ms. Bandla has worked for Virgin Group for several years, having served as Director for Washington Operations at Virgin Orbit, as well as Business Development and Government Affairs Manager for Virgin Galactic. Prior to her time at Virgin, she was an Associate Director at the Commercial Spaceflight Federation in Washington, D.C. Ms. Bandla is able to provide a perspective on space that few people on Earth can, having been part of Virgin Galactic's Unity 22 mission earlier this year, which took her and 5 other persons on the first ever suborbital spaceflight by a commercial space company. Now, as someone who has dedicated her career to space policy and who has now also experienced firsthand what being in space is like, Ms. Bandla is ideally suited to talk about the importance of keeping outer space a peaceful domain. Over to you, Sirisha.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Geiss, and thank you to the UN Institute for Disarmament Research for holding this vitally important conference on our outer space security. I'm honored to have this opportunity to speak with you all about the role of commercial human spaceflight and the importance of continued peaceful space domain. Spaceflight is not just a trip to space. It's an experience and a journey that starts well before the rocket lights. It's an experience that changes your perception and your view with respect to life on Earth and what our potential can be among the stars. I was lucky enough to embark on that experience this year aboard Virgin Galactic Spaceship 2 spacecraft, along with 3 of my crew members. Unity 22 was a 20-second test flight of Virgin Spaceship Unity, and the first test flight with the full crew in the cabin, including the company's founder, Sir Richard Branson. The crew fulfilled a number of test objectives, including evaluating the training program, the commercial customer cabin, the views of Earth, of course, and the experience for all of our future astronauts. My role in the flight was to test the conditions for conducting research, specifically human-tended research on our suborbital platform. So before I talk a little bit more about Unity 22, let me just briefly start with my journey, which again started well before the rocket motor fired and actually well before I was selected for the flight. I dreamed of going to space since I was young. I watched a lot of Star Trek back then. Well, actually, I still watch a lot of Star Trek, so maybe that point is slightly moot. Anywho, I have looked up to space heroes that I knew of, the Starship captains, the Apollo-era astronauts, trying to devise my path to space similar to theirs, though struggling to find where I fit in. And then I discovered Dr. Kalpana Chawla, the first woman of Indian descent in space. Seeing someone who looked like me doing what I wanted to do made space feel closer than ever. And for the first time, it felt like I could take a dream and turn it into a reality. Around high school, after I decided to become an engineer like Dr. Chawla, and after I basically had started filling out my NASA application, my eyesight went from bad to worse. So much so that I didn't meet the requirements to become a NASA astronaut anymore. It was around then, when I had just started moping and trying to reevaluate my life, that I saw the Anusari X Prize on TV. The Anusari X Prize was a prize given to the first private spacecraft that went to space twice, demonstrating both commercial viability and reusability. The spacecraft called Spaceship 1 won that prize, and after it won, Virgin Galactic was created to mature and bring that design to market, with the mission of making space accessible for all. And at 16 years old, I decided that was how I was going to go to space. Flash forward July 11 of this year, when I did indeed launch to space aboard Virgin Galactic spaceship. Virgin Galactic operates a hybrid spaceflight system made up of an airplane and a spacecraft. So you take off from a runway like an airplane and fly up to about 13,000 meters. At that altitude, once all the final safety checks have been done, the spacecraft is released from this aircraft. And a few seconds after release, the rocket motor kicks on, you're pushed into your seat, and you feel the roar and the power of the motor behind you. The ride was incredible. The rocket motor boost was one of my favorite parts. The sky transitions from a blue to a purple before going black. And I knew I was on my way to the stars. After the rocket motor cut off, we all began our tasks, and it wasn't until a little later in the microgravity period that I really took a moment to look outside. And the view was breathtaking. Our world and everyone and everything I've ever known looked so brilliant amongst the vast emptiness that surrounded it. And I can't wait to share that view with many, many more people. I don't want to dance around the elephant in the room that space is being seen as a billionaire's playground. However, the investment of the commercial space industry, in addition to the programs at national space agencies, are continuing humanity's technological and societal progress. With the absence of exploration and the pursuit of innovation, that progress halts. The pursuit of space technology has given us GPS, weather forecasts, and worldwide communications. These assets are critical in studying what's out there in the universe, as well as what is happening on our very own planet. They are also monitoring and collecting critical data on climate change, as well as predicting and aiding response for increased natural disasters as a result. Space-based research is contributing to our knowledge database on processes and life on Earth, and the ultimate hope of building a better life for those on our planet. Commercial spaceflight companies are providing opportunity for those kinds of research and technology development to occur, with higher cadence of flights and significantly lower cost. In addition, I'd like to point out that this year, through these flights, I became the second Indian-born woman and the fourth Indian person to go to space. Wally Funk became the oldest person to go to space. Oliver Damon became the youngest person to go to space. Haley Arsenault was the youngest American woman to ever orbit the Earth and the first person with a prosthetic to go to space. And Dr. C.N. Proctor became the first African-American woman to pilot a spacecraft. All these through commercial flights this year, and within a few months. Commercial space companies are increasing access to space and increasing the diversity of those who get to experience spaceflight. The more people who are able to view the Earth from space in all its brilliance and all its vulnerability, the more perspectives, stories, motivation we will see for those to protect the planet we have and the people that inhabit it. Countries who do not have a national space program will have astronauts, and the communities of future generations will not only have more envoys of humankind, but envoys of hope and curiosity. However, for this version of the future to occur, space must remain peaceful, secure, and sustainable. The disarmament community, academia, and the commercial space industry must continue to work together to develop the policies that will ensure a safe space for the continued and sustained progress of humanity in space. The UN peace and security pillar should remain extended beyond our atmosphere to ensure that a peaceful space domain remains and is one that is the most beneficial to us all. Thank you so much for having me speak today.